It's a bigger primary day today. The breakdown starts now. Welcome to the breakdown. I'm Tara Setmayer. The Rick Wilson is off because he is traveling back from accepting a Webby Award. Thank you to everyone who voted for us on behalf of the Lincoln Project. But Rick will be back on Thursday, so no worries with that. However, Tiki may decide to co-host the show with me periodically, so be prepared for a couple Tiki sightings. We have a great show for you. I will not be alone. It won't be just me and Tiki. I have an excellent guest joining me tonight because it is primary day, and we have some big primaries going on, particularly in the state of Pennsylvania, where the intrigue there is just fascinating what's happening. And I have Will Bunch. He is a Philadelphia Inquirer reporter. He's also the author of a upcoming book or a new book, After the Ivory Tower Falls, How College Broke the American Dream and Blew Up Our Politics and How to Fix It. Will Bunch will be with me shortly. We're going to take a deep dive into what's the hell is happening in Pennsylvania. And but before we do that, I've got some headlines. We've got some last week in the Republican Party, and we've got some other primaries to talk about before we get to Will in a few minutes. So hang out for that. But first, over the weekend, we all are aware of the tragedy in Buffalo, the racially motivated tragedy shooting in Buffalo. And it really has sparked a conversation about this conspiracy theory of the Great Replacement theory, which for those of us who pay attention in the media or who watch Fox News occasionally, or they have to, like we do, to see what the hell they're doing over there, this is not a new concept. And the shooter had this manifesto where he talked in great length about this Great Replacement theory, this idea that Black and brown folks are coming into the United States to replace white folks. Where have we heard this before? Charlottesville. The idea of Jews will not replace us. Remember that? The neo-Nazis that were marching in Charlottesville, chanting that, and the other racist slogans that they were using at the time. This has been bubbling up, and it's not new, but it's become more pervasive and more mainstreamed since the era of Donald Trump ushered this in. And when you have people like Tucker Carlson talking about this on his show pretty often. Now, I've had it with Tucker Carlson and the lack of responsibility that folks like him and others in the right-wing ecosystem and elected officials in the Republican Party who have jumped on this bandwagon because they know that the issue of immigration and the sentiment in the country and their primary voters is one of fear of the other. They're doing this and they're not taking responsibility for words having consequences. What do you think is going to happen after you're constantly telling folks that they're being replaced, that there's a threat coming, that there's a brown menace coming from the southern border, or anything along those lines? The xenophobia is unbelievable. And they masqueraded in patriotism and security, and they're just, concerned about our country. But really, words have consequences. Liz Cheney, to her credit, called out Republican leaders and those in that ecosystem for this very sentiment. And I applaud Liz Cheney for doing that. And there's a lot of my friends on the other side, progressive friends and Democrats who never in their lives thought they would ever be cheering on Liz Cheney or any Cheney. But they are cheering her on for calling the bullshit out clearly, unlike others on the Republican side. Or the Wall Street Journal, who wrote an op-ed recently talking about the dangers of this partisan sniping and all this and that, and beating around the bush about the fact that it is Republicans who are perpetrating this. It is Tucker Carlson on Fox News and Elise Stefanik and all of these other folks who are, the list is long, right? Just Trump world, MAGA world, we already know how they feel. But no, Call them out by their names. And that's what we're doing. That is what we are doing here at the Lincoln Project. And I want to call out Elise Stefanik. Now, this is not the first time that we have put her on the spot. Elise Stefanik is the representative from upstate New York who replaced Liz Cheney after the Republicans kicked Liz Cheney out for the crime of telling the truth about Donald Trump and what happened on January 6th and the threat that he poses to our democracy. And oh, I'm sorry, she had a problem with the president of the United States fomenting a coup attempt, a violent one at that, where lives were lost. That got her kicked out of leadership for the Republicans. And she was replaced with this Elise Stefanik. Now, Elise Stefanik she's not recognizable today from before. She was considered a moderate. She was considered an up-and-comer. She went to Harvard. She was supposed to be reasonable. And she has turned into this MAGA robot, Frankenstein, because she is so drunken with power and wants power. And she has turned into a mouthpiece for MAGA. She is now a MAGA mouthpiece. This is someone who is number 3 in the Republican leadership in the House, Elise Stefanik. And after the shooter, we found out what happened in Buffalo. After we found out that the shooter put out this manifesto that sounded like a Fox News segment on Tucker Carlson, talking about this great replacement theory, it started to come out how Elise Stefanik, as the conference chair, that's her role. And the role of the conference chair is to be the messaging arm of the Republican House. That's what the conference chair does. She had actually purchased a bunch of Facebook ads last fall, pushing this idea of immigration being a problem. It actually says this: radical Democrats are planning their most aggressive move yet, a permanent election insurrection. The ad says their plan to grant amnesty to 11 million illegal immigrants will overthrow our current electorate and create a permanent liberal majority in Washington. Now, this is just a dog whistle, softer version of just saying that they're here, they're coming to replace us. But the sentiment is the same. And she knows this. They know what the hell they're doing. Don't let them tell you that they're, oh my goodness, we had no idea. We're just speaking the truth about illegal immigration and bullshit. They know exactly the consequences of talking about this and indoctrinating people with this nonsense over and over again. They know, but they don't care because it's about power for them. It's about getting reelected. They don't care. Well, she's been in the hot seat. She's been trying to clarify her statements, and she's been saying a couple of things lately. She said some things about groomers and pedos recently, but we're not going to get into that today because this is about Buffalo and the horrific tragedy there. We continue to pray and send our thoughts and prayers there and hope that there's swift justice for that bastard who murdered those folks. But the idea here is that she is not by herself. She didn't just make this up. This is pervasive now, mainstream in the Republican Party, and she needs to be held accountable for it, just like Tucker does too. And we put out a little rapid response concerning Tucker Carlson. Take a look.
Instead, Gendron's letter is a rambling pastiche of slogans and internet memes, some of which flatly contradict one another. The document is not recognizably left-wing or right-wing. It's not really political at all. The document is crazy. It's the product of a diseased and organized mind.
I learned it by watching you.
Exactly. That was Tucker Carlson in his first show back after the shooting over the weekend. Not taking responsibility at all, of course, shocker. Trying to turn it around and make it seem as though, oh, well, you can't blame us for a mentally ill teenager who decided to shoot up a supermarket. And now it's the liberals, it's the progressives' way of trying to silence your political speech. Here we go again. Here we go. The right-wing media ecosystem and the right-wing, elected officials here, the MAGA world, trying to play the victim. Somehow they're the victims here. They're not responsible. They don't play a role. No, they're the victims. This is about cancel culture. No, it's not. It is about you espousing racist conspiracy theories that are ginning people up into believing that they are being replaced, that white people are being replaced in this country, and that they need to take up arms and take action to stop it. And then people end up dead. This is not the first time. And I fear that this won't be the last either if something isn't done about these people and holding them accountable for their speech. You can have free speech all you want. Doesn't mean there aren't consequences for it. Call out the advertisers who are continuing to advertise on Tucker Carlson's show. Call out the corporate sponsors, the corporate donors to the Elise Stefanik's of the world. Lincoln Project put out a thread where we listed some of them. You have PricewaterhouseCoopers, you have UPS, you have Comcast. They are her largest donors. They have large presence in her district. Contact them. There's the information. Tell them the Lincoln Project sent you. Tell them to stop giving to Republicans like Elise Stefanik, who are spouting these dangerous conspiracy theories that are fomenting a potential freaking civil war in this country. What are we doing? People need to be held accountable for it, because I'm tired of this, and I'm not the only one. Millions of Americans look in horror at what the hell is happening in our country and what is going on with the Republican Party on the other side. Paul Ryan, where are you? You sit on the board of Fox News. I like Paul Ryan. He's a reasonable guy. He's actually a good guy. But what are you doing, Paul Ryan? Still sitting on the board of Fox. It's those people, the McCarthys, the McConnells, all of them who know better. There is no middle ground anymore. There is no being lukewarm on this issue. There cannot be. Blood is being spilled. Where does it end? Where does it end? Which leads me to looking at some more things that have been going on before we get into talking about primaries, because it's Tuesday, so that means last week in the Republican Party. Let's see what else the crazies are doing. Roll it.
Where exactly is all this criminal white supremacy, this right-wing domestic terrorism that poses, quote, the most lethal terrorist threat in the homeland? Of course, it doesn't exist.
Tragic event in Buffalo with numerous people being killed. In 18 months in Afghanistan, we lost nobody.
I have less political power because they're importing a brand new electorate. Why should I sit back and take that?
Donald Trump is still the president of the United States.
I have Donald Trump tattooed on my rear end.
The commander-in-chief was suggesting that the U.S. military shoot protesters.
Yes, in the streets
American
of our nation's
protesters.
capital. That's right.
We're going to let Joe Biden, with an A on the end, because he's wearing a mask, all right? I heard anything from a clone, and there's videos out where China, where they got clones in bags, and it's real.
Ted Nugent just texted me.
I will bulldoze every single Planned Parenthood facility in my state. I will make it a criminal offense to fund anybody that does this. And if you're found out funding murder or carrying out murder, you will be executed.
There won't be a loss of abortion access. I will never raise anybody's taxes.
Lindsey Graham is like a piece of dog crap you stepped in inadvertently and you can't get off your shoe.
The idea of being called ultra MAGA. I am ultra MAGA. I'm proud of it.
Then they called me the great king of MAGA.
Oh my God, blowing a shofar, which we have, by the way, I brought back from Israel. What is wrong with these people? And I'm sorry, I feel bad for any tattoo artist that had to look at Ted Cruz's ass to tattoo a picture of Donald Trump on it or whatever the hell he said, which we all know he's full of shit. Good grief. I can only imagine what Rick Wilson would have said in reaction to that. Oh my God. My gosh. Where to go? Primaries. Let's make the hard turn. Primary day, like I said, we've got a bunch of the primaries going on. The biggest ones in Pennsylvania and North Carolina that we are paying attention to. We also have Idaho out there. People think, why do we care about Idaho? Well, it's in line with this idea, these racist ideas that are being pushed in the Republican Party front and center. Their lieutenant governor out there, her name is Janice McGeachin. She was caught a couple months ago attending a white nationalist conference. And then when she was told about it, she hemmed and hawed and tried to skirt around it. And now she's crazy. She's been doing crazy things. And she is running again to be governor in Idaho. And the governor has a lot of power out there. We've talked about this before in different states. Governors have different powers. But this is another example of that. She went to a white supremacist conference and yet she is not disqualified in Idaho. There's a possibility that she could win the primary there and unseat the incumbent governor, who is not a wackadoo like her. That's that. North Carolina, Madison Cawthorn. I'll be very curious to see what happens. You have 8 people running in this primary against him. He's been in a lot of trouble. We've seen the Oppo dumps on him. I don't ever want to see as much of Madison Cawthorn's ass either, ever again. But the constituents there in North Carolina seem to be sick of his antics. More Oppo came out about him and they call him the douche crew. That's a name that he gave to his frat brother friends from college that he's had on his payroll, that he's giving bonuses to, that he's double paying them in the campaign and in his House office, which is not allowed. There has been an ethics investigation opened up into him now on this. He's in a lot of trouble. I mean, he's a 26-year-old degenerate and clearly unqualified to be a member of Congress. And however you feel about that district, the people of the North Carolina's 11th district deserve better representation. And I will be very curious to see if he is defeated. I believe you have to have 50% to avoid a runoff in North Carolina. I don't see it happening for Cawthorn this time, despite Trump coming out and endorsing him and making excuses for his, the wayward mistakes of a young man. But he's brilliant and deserves a second chance. Well, why are we surprised from Donald Trump? Birds of a feather. One other thing about Cawthorn. When he ran in 2020, do you know that 100 of his fellow students at Patrick Henry College signed a letter about his alleged sexual misconduct? That he had done unwanted sexual advances on students and luring women into taking rides with him, and then he would force himself on them. 100 students. He didn't graduate, by the way. He left after 1 year. Wrote a letter and signed it saying that this guy was bad news, and he still got elected in 2020. What does that say about us? One last thing. Pennsylvania. Yes. Big intrigue going on there. And I think that we should bring in Will Bunch because Will has covered Pennsylvania. And I know I'm not the only one who's fascinated by the dynamics there. Like I said, Will is he's a reporter for a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And he has his new book, After the Ivory Tower Falls, which drops in August. I wasn't sure it was out yet, but it's upcoming, correct?
Correct.
All right. Will, thank you for joining me here on The Breakdown. This is your first time. So you notice that
it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. You notice we're a little loose over here at the Breakdown Lincoln Project.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Good. So Will, I'm from Jersey. I'm from right over the Delaware River there, and so I guess I could qualify to run for Senate in Pennsylvania since having Jersey residency seems to be a theme.
You might be too familiar with Pennsylvania to qualify. I'm not sure.
Talk to me. We have this fascinating primary happening there. Let's start with the Democrats, actually, because news broke today that Mr. Fetterman will be undergoing a surgical procedure because he recently had a stroke. We just found that over the weekend. He has been in the lead. And I think do you think that this information about him and his health will have any impact? Because he looks like he's positioned to win this primary over Connor Lamb.
I mean, my years of experience coming elections is this will probably give him a few extra votes. It'll probably help him. I can't imagine the kind of person who would look at this situation and change their vote away from him because his prognosis is good. He's a very lucky man. We're all fortunate that apparently this stroke that he was suffering on Friday. I mean, it sounds like a horrible event, but it was caught right on time. He got to the hospital quickly. They intervened. The latest news that came out this afternoon is that he's going to be getting a defibrillator, like a pacemaker type device. And, he's 52. I mean, he's
relatively young.
Yeah, he's a good age, and he actually was overweight a few years ago, and he's lost weight. So hopefully between that and the fact that this heart problem has been detected and that his doctors assure everybody there's going to be no cognitive damage. So, I mean, he'll probably get a few extra sympathy votes, in my opinion. And the important thing is really not what's happened in the last week, but what's happened in the last 6 months, which is he's run a really strong campaign. I think whatever, it's not been a huge issues-oriented campaign. It's really been a campaign built around a certain kind of style. And I think he's really defined a kind of assertive style for Democrats that the Democratic Party base is really craving.
Let me ask you about that, actually, because you wrote an article recently, and you tweeted it out today. Right, about where he came from. You said, sure, voters care about inflation and whatnot, but what they really care about is sending a giant middle finger to the educated elites that much of the U.S. middle class now despises. I think that we've seen that on the Republican side, but he's encompassed a similar sentiment on the Democratic side that I think a lot of people have not really paid attention to.
Yeah, he showed that this populist style doesn't have to be just a Trumpy Republican thing, and when you think about it, I mean, if you go to rural or these kind of Rust Belt towns that we have in Pennsylvania that have suffered economically, I mean, sure, there's Christian nationalists and there's people who believe in QAnon, but there's also a lot of secular folks. There's a lot of people who don't despise immigrants. They welcome diversity. Blue collar people. There's people who belong to labor unions and have kind of more progressive ideas about corporate bosses and things that a Democratic candidate can relate to if that Democrat can relate to them in their terms. And Fetterman comes off as somebody who's not talking down to them. He's he understands their style. He's somebody that they'd like to have a beer with. And that became a cliche during the George W. Bush years. But
that's right. But
he's made that cliche into kind of a reality. People really do want to have a beer with John Fetterman, and that matters so much to people because I think the mood of the voters is less about issues and the feeling that they're just disconnected from what you might call the ruling class. And when somebody like Fetterman goes out to where they are to see them and to talk to them on their terms and their language, with kind of their style, they're relating to that. And I really think Democrats around the country should pay attention pay attention to what John Fetterman has done here in Pennsylvania. Yeah. Because there's a lot of other races where we need that. There's a term in Philadelphia we use. We call it attitude, which is our pronunciation of attitude. But it's something that a lot of Democratic candidates could really use.
We have a different pronunciation for attitude in Jersey, and it includes an F word. Yes, it's fucking attitude in Jersey. You tapped into something that I think people have, again, not really fully embraced, which is going back to meeting people where they are and feeling heard. That's what Donald Trump did. Like him or hate him, he gave people a voice that felt voiceless before, right? The silent majority. And now they feel that they have someone who speaks like them, that, relates to them and gives them voice. And I think that Fetterman has done that. I may not agree with Fetterman on policy. I'm not a progressive, but you're right. This is not an election about policy. It's not in Pennsylvania, not in most places, really. It is about how people feel. The idea of wanting to have a beer with someone is an emotional connection to the candidate, which is a very powerful tool when it comes to campaigning, which is why personality and charisma and these kind of overtaken qualifications, AKA Madison Cawthorn is an example, and many others. But this is something that I think that Democrats really need to embrace it again, because the retail politics, it works in places like Pennsylvania. They thought Connor Lamb would be the guy and that he would win statewide and have the better chance of becoming a senator. And Fetterman I think they underestimated.
Yeah, I think Connor Lamb, and I don't think Connor Lamb's a bad person or anything, but I think he was a kind of a consultant's idea of what
on
a
paper
Democratic candidate should look like.
Right.
And a lot of there's Pennsylvania. There's a lot of old school party bosses here. The kind of urban character you thought died away 40 years ago. Those people are still around, and in Philadelphia, still running the Philadelphia Democratic Party. These board leader types, chewing on the cigars. It's pretty amazing, and you've got them. You've got them in Pittsburgh too, right? And,
right.
These people endorsed Connor Lamb. They thought that a moderate, somebody who is on the scale closer to Biden or even to Joe Manchin is what voters wanted, and that's a misreading, I think, of the Democratic Party, at least in Pennsylvania today. I mean, this is a party. There's a strong base here in Philadelphia, and that base elected ultra progressive district attorney in Larry Krasner, it's not your grandfather's Democratic Party in Pennsylvania, and I think Fetterman gets that. I think he's an icon also to Gen X. Generation X has been so ignored, and I was reading.
That's me. I'm a Gen Xer.
Yeah, right. I was reading some of the profiles of Fetterman in his column, and I was impressed with how many of the people who were super fans are people who were in their like mid 40s, late 40s, or early 50s, like Fetterman. It's like Generation X. I'm a boomer myself, but Gen X, they've been so disrespected, and he's really one of their own, And I think that's a factor that needs to be explored once he's the general election nominee.
Before we move on to the Republicans, where things are a little spicier, what do you say though to the fact that Fetterman really wasn't endorsed by folks in his party in the House and Senate, in the Pennsylvania House and Senate? There, is that a generational difference, or because usually they're the ones who know him the best. As lieutenant governor, he's kind of like the vice president who runs the Senate, in Congress. But there, he's pretty influential with the Pennsylvania legislature, and he didn't really get a lot of support from his own people who presumably know him best.
Well, it's lieutenant governor. He presides over the Pennsylvania Senate, and he could have been more of a player in Harrisburg these last 4 years. And it's important, the thing is, and he's running for the U.S. Senate, right? The world's greatest deliberative body. So they like to fantasize about themselves. It's not really true, but it is true that collegiality is a factor in being a Senate. And Fetterman is this case study where he's somebody who really knows how to connect with voters and is very, I don't know, diffident, if that's the right word, about relating to his fellow politicians. And I don't know. We'll see. I hope that if he wins, I think he'll be the slight favorite even in a tough year for Democrats. I think he'll have a good chance of winning in November. And if he gets to Washington, I hope he figures out how to kind of fashion a new kind of agenda around the way that he ran for office. And to do that, he's going to have to work, I think, harder at making those connections, because that's an area where he's failed.
That's for sure. You really, you don't get along well in Washington on your own island. You don't get much done. So
and we've had that, it's no secret I'm a big fan of Bernie Sanders, but that's been a criticism lobbed against him, right?
Right.
That he's not that he has great ideas, but he's not collegial. So
that's right. He is the resident congressional curmudgeon.
Yeah. Well, he might have a friend in John Fetterman. So
they could be the curmudgeon caucus, I guess, in the Senate. So I'm assuming then your prediction is that Fetterman wins. Is there any chance that Connor Lamb? Do you think Connor Lamb has any chance to overtake him?
No.
We're going to talk Republicans. No,
absolutely. He's not caught fire at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And, okay, but the other side is crazy.
Yes, let's talk Republicans in for the next couple minutes. So Kathy Burnett, speaking of fire, she has caught fire. She has quickly ascended to a competitive position in this race where most people, I have to be honest, I never even heard of her until 2 weeks ago. And, it was all about McCormick. and Dr. Oz, and the internecine war between MAGA world and Trump supporters over his endorsement of Oz. Oz has his own problems with being accused of being a carpetbagger. He's changed his position on things. He's gotten booed at Trump rallies when he's been mentioned, which is a very strange dynamic. McCormick has tried really hard to kiss Trump's ass, spent time down in Mar-a-Lago. His wife worked for Trump. He's the establishment candidate. Mitch McConnell and everybody like him. He's got money, but it's been back and forth, and it's allowed this Kathy at the top here not really being vetted much. And now we see she's starting to be vetted, and folks are asking more questions now because they're going, oh, who is this? And she's not answering them well. Talk to me a little bit about this Kathy Barnett. Who the hell is she? And where did she come from?
Yeah, she's this kind of, we see these people out there, right? These B-list Fox News, the people who, show up on Fox News at 2 a.m, right? And, and they've gotten their, self-published book or whatever that they're hawking, and they go on this kind of far right circuit of podcasts and Diamond and Silk type radio interviews, and Kathy Barnett is that kind of figure. She kind of came out as a black conservative, and that was, I think, catnip to Fox News show.
Of course.
Yeah, so
we're not racist. See, look, we got a black Republican over here. They believe me, as a former black Republican in those circles, I know how it goes.
Yeah, right. So she got a few bookings. She wrote a book. I honestly have no idea if it sold any copies or not, but she wrote a book a couple of years ago, and then kind of turned up in Pennsylvania, a state where she was apparently she moved here sometime in the 2010s. Kind of. I mean, she beat the right. She beat Oz and McCormick by a few years, basically. But the stampede of future candidates moving to Pennsylvania. But people didn't really know who she was, and where she lives, Montgomery County, which is probably the most affluent suburban county north to northwest of Philadelphia, has become a very Democratic area. And used to be kind of a Reagan Republican area, and it's split to being very Democratic.
There, in like Delaware County and places they helped Biden win. Those are those areas, right?
The suburban collar counties around Philadelphia have all pretty much flipped Democratic, and so she embarked on kind of a suicide congressional run against Madeline Dean, the Democratic congresswoman who represents Montgomery County in 2020. The most publicity she got was after the election, when she started engaging these Mike Lindell type big lie election fraud artists, saying she actually was briefly involved in an effort of people knocking on people's doors, trying to find this mythical voter fraud in a race that she lost by 20 percentage points, because any Republican would have lost that race by 20 percentage points.
Right.
It was kind of crazy.
Meanwhile, but she's carried this over, though, right? Let's fast forward to this race. She's carried this, big lie. January 6th, Trump was screwed over, and there's all this election fraud. She's a QAnon sympathizer. She is an acolyte of Mastriano, who is the big QAnon conspiracy theory. January 6th, sending buses to January 6th. Doug Mastriano is Doug, right? Mastriano is supported by Donald Trump and is most likely going to win the governor's primary for Republicans, which concerns the Republican Governors Association. But this Kathy Barnett, video was just released of her marching with the Proud Boys on January 6th. And I mean, that'll help her in the primary, which is a scary thought. But in the general election, I would hope that would be something that would concern most people in Pennsylvania, among other things, because her personal resume is in question, right? It's in question.
Yeah. Well, let me just stop here and interject, because this is one of the most amazing things I think I've ever seen in more than 40 years for me now covering politics, which is we have a scenario in Pennsylvania right now where we could wake up here in our state tomorrow morning and the three top Republican candidates on the November ballot, the candidate for governor, the candidate for lieutenant governor, which is a complicated mess I won't get into, but and and if Kathy Barnett wins, the candidate for Senate, could all be people who participated in January 6th, all people who sent buses down there, tried to rile people up. They unearthed yesterday a Kathy Barnett tweet of January 5th about it was going to be a wild rally and people need to stir things up, and then here's this video and these pictures of her marching with members of the Proud Boys, some of whom who've since been criminally charged for the activities. We don't know how far she made it, if she breached the Capitol. It would not shock me if she wins the nomination and it comes out a week later that there's a picture of her doing God knows what on January 6th. I mean, maybe I shouldn't speculate, but that potential exists because because we just don't know. And her rise has been amazing. I have a couple things I'll say about her rise. One, and I mentioned this in my column on Fetterman, is she kind of did sort of the same thing on the Republican side in that she had a very relatable style. Her campaign slogan is "I am you," and again, it's just the zeitgeist, if that's the right word, of 2022. Yep. That voters want that person they can relate to, who understands me, doesn't talk down to me, and the two main people she's running against are these out of touch multimillionaires, especially David McCormick, who just never caught on here. But and Mehmet Oz is much better. He's a
TV personality.
Yeah, and he's a popular TV personality for a reason. Yeah. He does have that artist. He does have that charisma and that ability to connect with people a little bit better. But
he's a better bullshit artist. So that works.
His problem is more the fact that McCormick, who and his billionaire friends poured tens of millions of dollars into this race to drive up Oz's negatives, and boy did it work, because the thing is, the material was there. There was so much TV footage of him interviewing a transgender kid, and supportively, and talking about we should have red flag laws for guns, and even adopting what certainly looked to the world like a
pro-choice
position on abortion, all of those things. And I haven't spent a ton of time out on the campaign trail, but the couple of times I've gone out and I've been able to talk to some rank and file Republican voters, when you talk to them, what they do is they parrot back what they heard in those ads. They say, I just don't know about Oz. I think he's too squishy. He's soft on guns. He's soft on abortion. And then, David McCormick is, quote, a globalist, which is right. I hate that term with all its anti-Semitic.
That's Steve Bannon and those guys that are talking about statists and globalists in China and all of that. You're right. And believe me, those of us at the Lincoln Project who have been in politics a long time understand those ads, and they understand why it works, because those messages are short, simple, and they repeat them over and over again. And it works. And that's, it's worked for them.
Those two have had their reputations damaged almost to the point beyond repair in Pennsylvania. And here's relatable Kathy Barnett, who knows how to talk to people, and she's got her origin story about she doesn't have to have a coherent position on abortion rights because she doesn't have one.
No,
because she has a story. Her story which again, it's hard to check these things out exactly, but her story is that her mom was raped at age 11, which is horrible if that's true, and that that she was the product of that birth taking place, and as a result of that, she's been endorsed by these leading,
the pro-life movement, and the timing of it with the Roe v. Wade decision about to be overturned, and the controversy there has really shown the spotlight on her, and she, it's created a lane. It's created a lane.
It's a lane. Having said all of this, she may not win.
Which I was going to ask you, because as we're wrapping up, I just wanted to ask you: do you think she has a shot at winning?
It's a real 50-50 situation. The polls. I've seen several polls in the last day or two, and they all show that Oz is still clinging to a lead. And the dynamics are a little bit different in each race. In this race, you have the fact that Trump And you know, Sean Hannity has been going crazy every night on Fox, trying to tear down Kathy Barnett. And but that said, I also saw a poll that showed that there's still a lot of undecideds in the race, and that the undecideds seem to be breaking more for Barnett than they are for Oz.
Which
if
is
I,
just
you know,
I
don't know who's going to win. If you forced me to make a $20 wager, though, I think I'd wager on Barnett because she's getting those undecided voters at the last minute. So
listen, you're not alone. Our Lincoln Project extraordinaire on extremism, Trygve Olsen, who just did a special last night with Maya May called "The Game We're In," talking about the stakes of what we're dealing with here with this extremism and what's going on with Republicans. Trygve said a week and a half ago that he predicted that Kathy Barnett would win because of all of the things that you just laid out and what we just said, and which is a scary thought given her position on things and how out there she is alongside Mastriano. So I don't know. We'll see what's happening there in Pennsylvania. The polls will be open until probably when the show airs. While we're airing, they'll be closing.
8 o'clock is when the polls.
Yeah, that's right. So just in a little bit, in a little while,
we're almost there.
It's we will all be paying very, very close attention. Will Bunch, thank you so much. Check out his column over there at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Make sure you check out his upcoming book, After the Ivory Tower Falls, which drops in August. Thanks so much, Will.
Have me back, and we'll talk about the great college, non-college divide between Republicans and Democrats.
We could talk about that in the fall, which will be a good time to talk about that when all the kids are going back to college.
Absolutely. We'll see you then. I hope so.
Thanks so much, Will.
All right. Thanks, Tara.
Yeah, fascinating dynamics for sure. I will be waiting with bated breath about for those results. And of course, on Thursday when Rick is back, we'll have some analysis on that as well. But before we go tonight, I wanted to make sure that I spoke for a minute or two, just briefly about that it's Police Week. And everyone knows that I am a proud wife of a federal law enforcement officer and the granddaughter of a police captain, so I bleed blue. And Police Week is the most wonderful time of the year in Washington, next to Christmas time. But this week, we have, a little bit of a heavy heart because of what happened in Buffalo. And I wanted to make sure that that I properly honored one of the officers, the retired Buffalo police officer, Aaron Salter Jr., who was working as a security guard at the Tops supermarket the day that gunman came in. He engaged the gunman, but because he had on body armor, it didn't penetrate him, and he was ultimately killed by the gunman and gave his life heroically. And that is something that, if we could just put that picture back up of Aaron Salter. This is a picture of him when he was a Buffalo police officer back in 2009. And like I said, he retired and he was there working as a armed security guard, and he tried to take the guy out and lost his life, but he probably saved lives in that exchange anywhere. And he is a hero, and he is one of many. Every year we lose officers. And during Police Week here in Washington, they have what is called the National Law Enforcement Memorial, which is down near the Building Museum. If you're ever in Washington, I suggest you go and visit it. And they do something called they do the annual vigil to the fallen officers, and which is an absolutely beautiful ceremony. And I've gone many, many years, especially when I worked in Capitol Hill. I used to go and participate in all the Police Week festivities. But that vigil is something that I think people should experience if you have the opportunity, especially if you've ever had a fallen officer in your family or circle of friends. It is incredibly moving, and the level of support that you see from law enforcement families is very similar to the military brethren. And I encourage folks that if they want to donate, because there are funds for the National Law Enforcement Memorial, that there is an organization. I actually have a license plate on my car that supports the National Law Enforcement Museum and Memorial there, and that's a picture of it. So go check out nleomf.org and learn more if you want to support fallen officers. But That's my salute to Police Week and to all of the brave men and women who in blue who serve this country honorably, and to their families as well. So we thank you for that. All right. On that note, that is it, I think. And yeah, that's it for tonight's breakdown, watching the primary results. And don't forget, if you're pissed off about Elise Stefanik and Tucker Carlson and all of them pushing these horrible racist theories that are leading to violence, let their advertisers know, and check out our call to action on the Lincoln Project social media sites. Thank you again. And check out We're Speaking tomorrow night. They'll be back to their regular scheduled programming with Lisa and Maya, and they have Mallory McMorrow as their guest tomorrow. So check them out, and I'll see you Thursday.